Okay, today we are with Ted and John Edd Wampler. Most of you have heard and eaten their product for years, so we're honored to be here, and we're going to talk about the history of the company and some of those stories about their parents and grandparents. So, first of all, I've heard about your father, Ted Sr.
Mm-hmm.
Each of you tell me one at a time. Why were your parents, why were they special?
Oh, wow. Gosh.
Dad, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, Dad did so many things just unique from what I would think a lot of people would do. For example, when he was a justice of the peace, he married a whole lot of people, and he never collected any money for that. Of course, the JP could get paid, but one of the things Dad would do is at the wedding, when it was over, the groom would always say, "What do I owe you?" Mm-hmm. And Dad would always say, "What do you think she's worth to you?" And so right then, of course, the guy would get nervous, and he'd get his wallet out and look in it, and take money out and hand to Dad. And then Dad would take that money and turn to the bride and give it to her and say, "Let me be the first one to give you a wedding gift." And he said, "All I want is for you to cook Wampler sausage for breakfast for him." And so Dad did all kinds of things like that. Anytime there was a tragedy around, somebody would, like a house would burn, things like that, Dad would go, with money. I've known of him doing that all over the community. Deaths in the family of different people all around the community. John Edd and I saw Tim and Chris Wampler at the funeral home, is where we got to know our cousins, really, because Dad and Harry both would go to the funerals of just about everybody because they knew everybody.
Yeah.
And so just going and ministering to people, Dad and Mom both, anytime there was a tragedy, that's where you'd find them. As a matter of fact, the car wreck that took our sister, Mary Lee, Mom and Dad both dedicated their lives after that to the Compassionate Friends, and that's a group that helps people that have lost a child. Okay. And so Dad even went to, he would never really want to travel much, but he went to the national conventions. He wouldn't fly because he said the Bible says, "Lo, I'm with you always," and he means that's not in an airplane. But he would drive to the conventions to, just to learn more about how to help other folks, because he was helped after Mary Lee's passing. Mm-hmm. And so, they did a lot of things like that.
And what was your mother's name?
Frances.
Yeah. Dad wrote a book called "Will Our Tears Forever Flow?" And it was about the grieving process and the recovery. And he sold those books, but all the proceeds, of course he gave a lot of them away, but if anybody wanted to pay for them, all the proceeds went to Compassionate Friends.
Yeah.
And he chaired the Compassionate Friends for probably 15 years. And Mom would watch the obituaries, and she would give him the contact information anytime that there were parents that survived, because you knew they had lost a child. Mm-hmm. And I remember I was in his office one day when he mailed the 5,000th letter to grieving parents. And he always included his contact information. Mm-hmm. And he would spend hours on the phone with grieving parents. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people, what they really need is to be able to tell their story. Mm-hmm. And part of the process of telling your story is you're convincing yourself that it's real, that it actually happened. And so in Compassionate Friends, they hosted a Christmas breakfast every December for the parents that were active in Compassionate Friends. And cold weather or whatever, I'd get the privilege of being out there to greet their cars and park them, but But really, there was no dues to join that group, but they said it was the highest price anybody could pay. And one of the things a lot of people would do is tell those grieving parents, you should move on, you should get over it, you should. And one of the fathers in that group, one of the things he'd tell people, he'd say, don't let somebody should all over you. They ministered. I was, and that book was available on Amazon and different places, but I was in his office one day when he got a call from somebody in California, and they said that book was the most help that they'd had from anybody. And you mentioned the Justice of the Peace. He was the youngest Justice of the Peace elected in the state of Tennessee.
How old was he?
And he was the last
living
justice.
Really?
When he passed, he was the last one that had judicial powers. See, they went on to remove the judicial powers, but when we were kids, he held court in our home, and he had a big tape recorder about this big, reel to reel, and it was what I'd call, and I know he would call, common sense court. Because, you know, a lot of times...
we need to bring that back.
That's right. Yeah. But he would record and you know, small claims kind of stuff, and you mentioned that he married.
Well, sometimes he'd marry a couple, then he'd wind out taking out a peace warrant.
Yeah.
You know,
and
then sometimes they'd get a divorce, and then he remarried. Yeah, he actually had some people that he remarried.
Yeah,
and
of course he was married to our mom, but and by the way, she moved in next door. He lived where this house is, and she moved here from Indiana next door when she was 9 and he was 11. And he had a thing in his office, a picture of her as a child, and a picture of her in high school, and a picture of her at their 25th wedding anniversary, and it said, my childhood sweetheart, my high school sweetheart, my lifetime. So he, you know, Eaton's Crossroads, he always said that he'd rather be hung in Eaton's Crossroads than die a death anywhere. Than be hung, than die a natural death anywhere else.
Anywhere.
I'm sorry.
No, he said he'd rather be hung
here
at Eaton's Crossroads than die a natural death anywhere else. Yeah.
Yeah. So he was loyal to Eaton's Crossroads, and so he also served on the county commission for many years. And he did some things, you know, like going and getting people to sign to agree to have the right-of-way go across their land, for example, to put in Hines Valley Road back here, where not too far from where we're sitting. Yeah. And a lot of things like that. And then he was on the school board for many years. And during the time he was on school board, I know they built what's then the new Loudon High School, where Loudon High School still is. And one of the things they did, he was chairman, they gave him a card that was a lifetime pass to any sporting event at Loudon High School. And of course, if he ever went years later and he'd show that, you know, whoever's at the gate, they'd go, who are you?
So he did use it.
Yeah.
He occasionally just for fun, you know, for fun. But so he was active on county commission, and he was and school board. He was chairman or foreman, I guess, of the grand jury for about 15 years. Yeah. And he believed firmly this country was founded on property rights, and that if you weren't doing anything illegal on your land, that the county commission or the zoning board of zoning or anybody like that shouldn't be able to tell you what you could do on your land as long as you weren't breaking the law. And he during that 15 years, the county never got a true bill against anybody for doing something on their own land that wasn't illegal. And Harvey Sproul asked if he could address the grand jury one time, and Dad told him that he could. And so Harvey came in and he said, now, Mr. Wampler is not a fan of zoning and ordinances and those kind of things, but they are the law. and it's your job to enforce the law. And he said, they're the law, just like the 10 Commandments. And so Dad got up and said, are you telling me that what a bunch of do-gooders decided on a Monday night in Loudoun County is equal to God taking his finger on Mount Sinai
And inscribed it into the tablets.
Yeah. And
Dad,
of course,
Dad and Harvey had a big laugh about that afterwards.
yeah, they were good friends.
Oh,
They
yeah.
were good,
Okay.
good. He was definitely about common sense. But I'll tell you, the first thing that ran through my mind when he said what was special about him, if you had a 50-50 deal with him, he would insist that you get the hyphen. He always wanted to deal fairly with people, and he was not about taking the credit for anything. It just so something got done, and so it was. I don't think that there could be a person anywhere, anytime that could ever say that he had mistreated them or not dealt fairly with them.
Yeah. Except us now. He didn't always deal fairly with us. Dad said he taught us business early. He would give us 50 cents if we'd go to bed without dinner, but then charge us $1 for breakfast the next morning. He would tell that himself, and then that he didn't require much of me or John Edd. We only had to work half days. He did not care what 12 hours that was, but we were going to put in 12-hour, a half day work. And he pretty much meant that. He did raise us working.
When school was out in the spring until it started back in the fall, the 4 of us worked at the plant, and that's when the different employees down there would take their vacation and we would fill in. But before we were big enough to actually fill in, we did things like I sat on the floor and folded boxes and different things. And now
John Edd made 3 cents an hour, and I was a nickel an hour. I was worth more than he was.
But you tell about our trip to Knoxville.
Well, as I recall, Dad had to go up to Tennessee Armature to pick up a motor, and so he wanted to take us with him. And so we wanted to go. And so he gets in the car and goes up the road, and me being much more honest than my brother, I said, "Oh my gosh, we forgot to clock out." And John Edd leaned over and said, "Teddy, the clock is still running." And so we were still going to make our nickel and our 3 cents an hour, on the way to Knoxville to Tennessee Armature to pick that motor up. So yeah.
Now Ruth Ann, hers was not by the hour, hers was by the job. She sat on the porch out front, what started out, and she was supposed to swat flies, and she got a nickel for every 100.
So y'all had 2 sisters.
Yes. Ruth Ann and Mary Lee.
Okay.
Yeah. And John Edd, brother. Everybody got a double name but me.
Well,
you got the
It's
junior.
Ted L.
yeah.
Well, so y'all grew up, I suppose, in the 60s mainly, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Think about the time you were growing up in the Eaton community in the 60s. What comes to your mind about the community?
Oh, wow.
How was it unique?
The Eaton's Crossroad community. Well, I mean, the main thing I think of, here, if I were to talk about my childhood, we were either at the funeral home or if we weren't at work, we're going to the churches, like mainly, going to church. And so, there was a really strong community of churches in this area. Of course, we grew up in Pleasant Hill.
Okay, Pleasant Hill Baptist Church.
Yeah. Yeah, sure did. Something else unique about this community?
I think everybody knew everybody.
Yeah.
We didn't have Facebook. Today we're high tech, low touch. But, it would be nothing unusual if somebody's cattle were out, everybody go help round them up. And, I think you could drive by and point and say, well, there's the Halls, and there, you knew all the neighbors for sure.
And we'd get out and play, in the evenings, and go over here and play with Brad Wolfenbarger and
The Oxendine.
the Oxendines and the Howards and all the kids. We'd all get together, and ride our bicycles, and parents didn't worry about us. You'd just come in at coming in time, and you're liable to get a whipping for something you might have done while you was out playing, but.
And you said Docs and Dan?
Oxendine.
Yeah, that was one of the families.
Yeah.
And the Edwards, of course.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, you asked about Mom earlier and talked about all the kids and neighborhood and stuff. None of the four of us ever had to ask if we could bring somebody home. They insisted it was our home too. And Mom was in heaven. If you had a big crowd, she could put a meal together out of nowhere, and if you walked in with 4 more people, nobody went hungry.
She didn't mind.
Right.
I suppose y'all went to Eaton School.
Yes.
Tell me about your memories of Eaton School.
Well,
Of course, Larry Duff was the principal.
yeah.
I think when he retired, he had been the longest serving principal in the United States.
At least the state
At one
of
school,
Tennessee.
at one location.
Yeah.
Right. But there's another case where you
There
knew
was,
everybody.
they didn't want us running out to drink water all the time. So there was that one, I can't remember that teacher's name, but she told all of us in 3rd or 4th grade that the water came from a well and a goat was down in it, and to keep us from wanting to go leave the class all the time. I had a square out in the hallway for like 6th or 7th grade where the teachers had me stand in the hallway a lot, for punishment, out of the classroom.
When Dad was at Eaton School, he and Charles Matlock, who was his best friend, they would disable the pump that brought the water from the well down to the school, and then the teacher knew that they had fixed it last time, so she'd let them out of class to go work on it, and they'd go play hooky all day, and then toward the end of the day they'd come back and hook the pump back up and come in and be heroes.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, they sure did. Dad and Charles Matlock were a lot. They were into a lot of trouble, a lot of mischief.
Our grandpa on our mom's side, John Wilburn, was a bus driver, and one time Charles and Dad passed out screwdrivers to everybody on the bus, and they unscrewed all the seats from the floor while they were riding, and they held them in place until they got off the school bus, and then when he went to pull out, all the seats fell over. Of course, that ended up being his father-in-law.
Yeah,
By the way, they were in the egg business.
yeah.
Okay.
The Wamplers were in the sausage business, and right next door they were in the egg business. And talking about the community, I don't know if it was once or twice a year, but all the kids in the community would gather when it was time to replace the chickens.
When you
The laying hens.
calling the chickens.
The laying hens, and you had a hook on the end of a stick about so long, and you'd do like that.
Catch them by the paw.
It would catch that paw like that, and then you pull it back to you and unhook them and put them down in the cage. And anyway, it was.
Yeah.
Well, we
that
were
was
we were
exciting.
catchers, so it looked that thing looked like it'd be in the Cat in the Hat kind of a deal. Come up and curve around. So you catch them by the paw, pick them up and carry them, and like John Edd and I and all the other little kids would take the chickens, carry them to like Jim Goodman and Max Wilburn, our uncle Max, and they would take them and put them in those cages, and then stack them on the back of the semi. You see those going down the road, a stacked bunch of So at culling time, we'd work all day and actually make pretty good money. They paid us. I forget what we make for that.
I don't know,
It
but
wasn't.
it was
much,
fun.
but it was really good at the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a all day long deal to cull out those chicken houses. Yeah.
In your school background, including Lenoir City High School and Eaton, was there a teacher who made a difference in your life?
You want to say her name at the same time?
Rick
Mary
Best.
Jane? I was thinking
Oh,
Mary Jane.
well, okay. Well, that was
Yeah.
one, and that's the other one. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
what was her name again?
Mary Jane
Mary Jane Denton.
Denton, Mary Jane Raymer.
Right.
Oh,
Yeah. I tell you what.
So why was she special?
She took the time to teach me bookkeeping and accounting. And had it not been for that, I promise you, all the kids in college who went into accounting, without that kind of background, they all had to drop out. and do something else to get back going. But it needs to be required in every school to have some bookkeeping, accounting, and know how to balance a checkbook and stuff like that. Just as basic coming out of high school. But yeah, Mary Jane absolutely.
She made you understand it, but just in the last
Just
2
to
days,
this right now. I mean, yeah, we have
just
a
in the
problem.
last
I
2
make T
days, T
accounts.
square. Yeah, T account.
You make a T account to figure it out, and that all goes back to Mary Jane.
I taught her kids at North. Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
You could contact any one of my 3 kids and start this sentence, say debits equal, and they'll finish it. Credits all over the world.
Really?
Debits equal credits all over the world. And
Well, of course, another teacher I was going to name is
Rick.
Rick Best.
yeah, he challenged you, made
absolutely.
you rise to be your best. Absolutely.
And then another one I can remember real quick is Sam Davis, shop teacher.
Yeah.
And I was always in trouble in shop, but then later in life, when I got out of school and in between school, and I was working construction with Bud Wilburn, Mom's brother, our uncle.
Okay.
Him and Sam were partners, and so I got to enjoy working with Sam as an adult. And Sam and Uncle Bud, it was a great experience, working and building houses all around here with that crew. The name of the crew, Sam named us. We were beat to fit and paint to match.
Joe Spence, of course, made history very interesting, and Mary Ann Stewart was tough, but she made you learn it.
Yeah. I wasn't going to name ones that were rough on me.
No, well, but at the time, but the ones that make you toe the line are the ones that you look back and appreciate. Sure enough.
If you don't mind me asking, what years did y'all graduate from that?
I'm 1976 for me, and you're
1978.
Yeah. So yeah, there were several others. Of course, when you go back to Eaton's, the Kleinstivers were actually. They were rough, but they were good teachers. Mm-hmm. And Mr. I just recently somebody told me about him, and now I'm drawing a blank on his name. He's out west.
Adrian Cooper.
Yes, mister Cooper.
Mm-hmm.
That was a really good teacher.
Okay.
And wasn't
John Napier.
John Napier, yeah.
And he's
there for 1 year, I think.
Yeah, and John Edd had him. I did not have John as a teacher, but John Edd did. And he was talking about Mr. Napier all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Was it science?
Yes.
Yeah.
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 And now Mr. Cooper taught us Spanish, and I still remember Tres a con agua, which is very handy. It's number 13 with water. That'll typically be good.
So once y'all got out of high school, was your goal to be working with your father at the plant, or?
I don't think either one of us actually originally.
He encouraged us to consider other things, and construction.
Yeah. Oh, I was definitely going to be a contractor. But and John Edd, with all this smart aleckness, was probably going to be an attorney.
I considered law.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. And he would be a good one because he's contrary as he can be. But when I got out of college, Jim Tennessee Tech.
Okay.
Both of us went to Tech. Mm-hmm. And so when I got out, Jim Wampler, who ran the packing department, had a heart attack. And so instead of going into construction with Uncle Bud, like Mark White did, one of my best friends in the world, instead of going into construction, I went in to help Dad then run the packing department. And that was 1980. And so while I was there that summer is when a company came to us to make their sausage for them because they had had trouble with the current supplier. And it was a restaurant chain called Bojangles. And so all of a sudden,
what year was this?
1980. And so a guy named Forrest Wilkerson, who owned McClancy Seasoning Company, told Jack Folk that he knew of a company that could make him what he wanted. And so those two came over that summer, and we wound up making their sausage for them.
Wow.
And so it was really something else. We had a single barrel log slicer at the time, and so it was our first ever semi-load of sausage patties. And
one item.
Yeah, one item.
Straight trailer load of.
But it
just one
was a
item
half
on
truck. Our first order was a half truck, and it took us a long time to put that together. And so it was stacked up, and out here at the culvert where Riley Drive turns onto Highway 70, we all went out in the parking lot to watch that truck leave.
We watched it till you couldn't see just the tail.
And when it turned, it looked like it was going to turn over.
Yeah.
And so everybody took a big gasp, because we thought, oh Lord, if that spills over, we're going to do it all again. And so anyway, so it went out and up the road, and so it went over to Charlotte, North Carolina. And so we've had that account ever since, along with many others.
45 years.
Yeah,
Yeah, I was going to ask you if you still had the.
Oh yeah, yeah, and it for the next 4 years, from 80 through 84, with them and the growth that they went into, and then all the other people that found us because of them, we basically grew tenfold in just 4 years. In volume, it was phenomenal. We mainly worked just to eliminate bottleneck after bottleneck as it was growing, and so it was really interesting times. And so then in '84, that's when we got into all the food service groups and things like that. And so of course now we're all across the country in our brand and private label brands, and then lots of restaurants now. And so it really has grown. John Edd was at Family Brands for years until we sold out of that company, and he retired from there and came here. And since he's been here, concentrating on retail sales especially, our retail growth has been phenomenal. You can go to some of the what I'd call people's favorite stores, and we're going to be the sausage that's there. And I actually had a friend send me a picture where they'd found our sausage in a store, and so they sent me this photograph, and I looked at the photo, and I don't guess I can say on here, but we were every brand in the picture that he sent. Yeah. We were all of them.
We had making the Wampler, and then the store brand, and then for some other meat companies who sell to that same store.
Yeah.
So
we were everything in the picture, so I was really tickled. I told him back, but I don't know if we should say on here because we got, I forget, we've got some NDAs, with some different companies. And I might have to, me and John Edd might have to wind up giving them a grandkid or something if we tell it.
And here's the thing. Well, neither one of us were built for jail. but back to Dad. He took all four of us before we entered first grade for a tour of the Loudon jail.
Yeah.
And he looked us straight in the eye and he said, I only know two paths in life, work and stealing, and this is where you go for stealing. And all four of us said we want a job. And he did.
He did
when
do that.
When you were 5 years old, you took a tour of the jail.
Now that is unique.
Well,
yeah.
So tell me how you got into the business.
Well, I graduated from Tennessee Tech also, and
barely.
Yeah. But I had talked to some attorneys and considered that path, and but just decided that the company business was the way to go. And at the time, our retail distribution was through Family Brands, the plant over in Lenoir City. And so,
which would be Elm Hill.
Elm Hill.
Elm Hill Brands. Yeah.
But our retail you know what? I'm going to back up and tell how that came about, because you can edit any of this stuff out.
Yes.
It's not good. I-40, of course, was not always there. Highway 70 has been there a long time, and that's where the plant is. And so in the early 60s, a man from a plant in Nashville that had the Elm Hill brand drove to East Tennessee to introduce the Elm Hill brand to the stores in this area. The stores at that time being Kaz Walker and White Store and a lot of IGAs and a lot of independent. And so he passed Wampler's on the way that morning, and then he was not successful getting his brand in those stores that day. His meetings went okay, but on his way home, maybe the next day, he stopped here and said, "We're thinking about bringing the Elm Hill brand to East Tennessee. Would you like to be the distributor?" Because he saw Wampler's in all those stores.
Yeah.
And of course, Dad and Harry saw that as an opportunity to earn some extra money to pay the gas for the trucks to run. So they started distributing from this plant the Elm Hill brand. Mm-hmm. And then the plant in Lenoir City was owned by another family and under a different brand. And they went out of business in 1965.
It was Fletcher Brothers.
And so at that time, the family from Nashville, which was the Balch brothers, and the Wampler family went together and purchased the Fletcher plant and then remodeled it and opened it in, I believe, June of 65 or 66.
I don't know.
It was on Mary Frances' birthday. And so they opened it as Elm Hill. And then because it had more office space and what have you, and was making a variety of different products, they moved the distribution from this facility over there. Okay. Dad initially went over there to be the manager, and Harry was going to be the sales manager. Mm-hmm. And
we had someone else running Wamplers at the time.
And so it turns out they decided for Dad to come back here and run
because the
this
fellow
plant.
that was running Wamplers had a nervous breakdown.
Right, yeah.
And it can cause that.
Yeah.
So he had a nervous breakdown.
Dad's still young.
Yeah, Dad went back to Wamplers, and Harry stayed at Family Brand, or at Elm Hill.
So he became the manager over there, brought somebody in to take his place as sales manager. But because at that time the retail distribution was over there, Dad felt like it would benefit this plant if somebody with a primary interest in this one was over there in sales. So I went over there in sales, and then not long after that, Harry went to Nashville to run the plant down there in Nashville, and so I kind of became the general manager at the Elm Hill plant. I was over there 40 years, and then we sold out a bit, and I agreed to stay for a while, and then 5.5 months later we had a fire, and I stayed through the rebuild and everything, and then came back out here. Glad to be out here.
Yeah. Okay, let's go back.
We'd have been better off if little brother would have come over here a long time ago. Because that's a lot of, he's brought a lot of growth to us.